Today is Monday, September 9th, and this is Spring Office Hours, Season 3, Episode 29, Spring 1 at Explore 2024 Recap. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, Deshaun Carter. Deshaun, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a great time to be a Spring developer, and yeah, things are they're moving. The ecosystem keeps on moving. I'm looking at the calendar. There's all sorts of new things to play with. So yeah, it's a great time. Life is good.
As somebody pointed out, on Office Hours with an Apple event I'll watch later. Which one will you watch later? You can watch the Apple event later. Spoiler alert, there's going to be some new phones released.
I think it's happened before.
Yes.
Where we've had our show during the Apple event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it feels kind of cool that we still get the people who get here when that's happening.
I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I want to see what's going on, but I can watch that later. This is more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So how's it been going? What have you been up to? I don't think we've had a show in a while, right?
It's been a while. It has been since before Spring 1, and Spring 1 was exciting for me. Yep. One of the things that I'm doing a lot of is I understand there's tons of amazing things happening in the Spring ecosystem, but where I find my joy is being able to start from zero and get something to production. So I'm spending a lot of time with the automation, and surprise, surprise, I'm incorporating Spring AI into bits of my path to production. So things are just really exciting. It's good times. How about you? What are you working on? What's keeping you busy?
Yeah, I've been busy catching up because we were pretty busy heading into Spring 1. So we had a lot going on there. So we had to kind of focus on that. And now that is complete, I can kind of turn my attention to some other things. One of the things I'm working on is I've been giving a presentation on AI and Spring AI, over the last year. I have a couple of presentations coming up, one in the middle of the month, one at JConf at the end of the month in Dallas. And so I'm kind of revamping that talk. Things that I've learned over the year, things I want to kind of update. So I'm starting from kind of slide one and redoing that just because it's a little more exciting. Again, I've learned some things over the last year and things I want to cut down on. So that's been fun. I'm deep into the world of AI. So just having fun with that. Playing with a bunch of different services. I've been using, I've talked to you about this. I've been using Claude a lot more than I have OpenAI's GPTs.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly
and
because
remind us why.
Yeah, I felt like there's a couple features on Claude. I'm now paying for it, so it's another AI service that I'm paying for. But there are a couple of services, if you go to Claude.ai, there's a nice interface there and a couple things that I really like. One is artifacts, and so if you tell it to write some code, it will split these out into it's just got a nice user experience when you're kind of doing that stuff instead of just dumping everything onto a screen. And now there's a feature that I've been using on the Pro plan called Projects, which allows you to kind of organize your work into projects. So as an example, if I were to use Claude to write blog posts, every time I would go in there, you can't just say write a blog post on Spring AI, right? You need to be very refined with your prompt, what is your role? What is your tone and voice? What is the output? And instead of having to do that every single time, you can put that into a project and say, now write me a blog post on Spring AI. And it uses all of that. And it uses other articles that I've written, things like that. So I've been enjoying those features a lot. Just, I think one of the things for me, working with a lot of these different AI tools is it's all an iterative process, right? Go in there, kind of mess around with it, refine that process, get a little bit better with that. And I think once you do that, you start to get some really great results. So just having fun with that. That's kind of been what I have been up to. Again, working towards this revamp of the presentation.
I've realized lately that when we're doing these live streams, I get to see your face, and I do a lot of the active listening with the head nods, but I haven't been chiming in. Oh yes, I agree 100%. One of the things that we're finding though is everybody kind of has their same or their default AI, their default LLM that gives them the most comfort. They like that certain set of features, and this is something that just about anybody in the space is doing. And I find I'm in the same boat. One of the things that you talked about is having these projects. We can now do that with Spring AI. With Spring AI's context, we can now add, I can have a store. I can have a Redis backend that keeps track of the blog posts or the content, the questions, the context that I've been using, and I can come back to it later. This is one of the really cool new features, and this space continues to change. So yeah, it's exciting times. The thing that's most relevant to me in this conversation is that we're now at that point where we're hearing more and more of the ways that the community is using Spring AI and the types of use cases that they're doing. Still the biggest thing, the number one question is, how do I train an LLM on my data? And still my number one answer is don't, right? We have all of these beautiful ways of bringing in your data to provide context to these LLMs and SLMs so that you don't have to train things, right? That's a huge benefit, is that there is so much data combined and being trained within these LLMs that you don't have to bring it. I know that there's going to be edge cases and there's use cases where, yeah, it's specific and you need that. But there are tons of use cases where you don't have to train these LLMs. You want to find an LLM that can, give you the right answers for your use case, and you can feed it the data, and Spring AI makes that easy.
Yep. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. There was a lot of talk about Spring AI at Spring One, which we'll get into. So today, we're really going to just kind of recap our Spring One at Explore 2024 experience there. We'll talk about some of the interesting things that we were talking about there, some of the presentations that we were able to catch, and we'll go through that. But as always, this is a live stream. So if you are here in the live stream, do us a favor, get your questions in. We'll see if we can't answer those or have one of the many awesome members of our community that are here live with us help us answer that. If you're not here live, that's okay. You can catch the replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel. We also go ahead and turn this into a podcast, so you can go ahead and catch this wherever you get your podcasts from.
I'm going to go ahead and leave this comment here on the screen. It does say Spring hours is greater than Apple events. I agree 100%.
Well, maybe not as high produced, but because those things are produced pretty well. But
value though.
Yeah, value. I like it. Cool. So if you are here, that's a good one.
Spring hours doesn't hurt my wallet as much.
No, we are open source here. We don't cost you any money here. This is free. Here's a comment from Simon. I've been catching up on all the Spring One talks, a lot of very interesting developments. I admit I had hoped for maybe a bit deeper dive on CDS.
That's good to know. We can probably schedule a deep dive on CDS, class data sharing, for an upcoming office hours. That is a topic that's near and dear. All these runtime efficiencies, I love that space. I love spending time there. And this is the cool new hotness, is class data sharing.
Yeah, and it's tough because, especially at a conference like this one, we had 45-minute sessions. It's really hard to go deep onto a subject like that in that amount of time. So, I saw a comment from Simon. I can recommend checking out Craig Walls' Spring AI in action. I believe there are some early releases of that already that you could start digging through. It's not been fully released yet, but really, really looking forward to that book. And every time I talk to Craig,
his repository is amazing.
Find him on GitHub, Habuma. Check that out. There's a lot of great stuff in there.
Daniel has a question here. He says, is fine tuning where most of the dev work is going to be when using many of these pre-trained models? This is something I'll answer right away. This is why we're finding more and more software engineers, traditional devs, being able to deliver outcomes and solid solutions using these LLMs, because they don't need the data science background in order to deliver them. So yes, I'm seeing a ton more of software engineers, software developers delivering AI-ified solutions, because it's so easy, because we have things like Spring AI that make it so easy. So yes, there's a definite move from my perspective, right? I didn't do any surveys, but from my perspective, I'm seeing more and more software engineers, traditional Spring developers delivering solutions with these LLMs and SLMs because it's so much easier these days because of these
Yeah,
trained models.
and yeah, if you have like a specific use case, like you have a specific product doing a specific thing, there are ways to like fine tune these models, get in there and kind of really update them. But from a fine tuning perspective, like if I just want to make it understand some more context and I want to provide my own data, yeah, things like Spring AI make that really easy.
And once again, speaking of Spring AI in action, Craig Waltz
Yeah.
is here in the audience.
Woo!
Like, how lucky are we? We are so like, this is really, really cool. Again, this is one of the things that makes this show kind of fun is we get interactions like this. We get folks joining in. So yeah, like it's good times. Craig, thank you so much for joining. And we're all excited and looking forward to your upcoming book, Simon, especially taking a look at the early access edition.
Oh, there's another good question. If you want to hit that next one. Hi, what is your programming book reading routine? This is a good one. I'll answer this quickly, and then I'll let you kind of answer this as well. I don't read programming books front to back anymore. I used to when I was like trying to learn a particular thing. I'm much more of a go in and pick out the pieces that I need. So if I pick up a book on Spring AI and something I want to learn a little bit more is how to fine tune a model or how to bring your own data, I may just jump into that book and like read that section. And then knowing that it's on my bookshelf, when I have another question, I can always kind of refer back to it. So that's kind of where I am at in my career. How about you, Deshaun?
I have exceptions, but I don't read a lot of programming books. I find myself digging in, but the one exception, and it's funny that Craig's here, is like the way that Craig's books are written. They're easy to have on in the background, and the things that he's covering are just like great reminders. Sometimes we get tied into a pattern, or we get our default patterns change, and sometimes it's nice to be reminded about all the other ways, all the other perspectives. So I find myself listening to a lot of books, but I'll listen to them passively. But if there's a new book, I try to like dig in and pull things out. So yeah, that's my pattern. So I'm always kind of, I think every week there is a book or two that's being played, in the background, and I'm listening to it passively. But I just kind of like rotate through.
I try to do that. Even with like I love audiobooks, but then like I try to find times to listen to them. And when I'm like running, I like to listen to music. So I listen to music. If I'm sitting here at the desk, I will listen to an audiobook sometimes, but I'm like, I cannot get this out of my system. I like to listen, but I also like want to like jot down notes and like try to remember key takeaways and stuff. And so for that, it doesn't become that much passive. I'm always like trying to like really consume a book instead of just listen to it. And
if I'm gonna
that's a character flaw. I need to like stop doing that. But
if I'm gonna go front to back, if there's a book that I want to like dig in and really absorb, I like to do it with somebody else. I like to do like a book club, and hey, let's get through 2 chapters in this amount of time, and then let's discuss. And that's my favorite way of consuming, but I don't do that as often as you might expect, or as I would think.
That's a really good one. One of the Java user groups there, the online Java user group, used to have a book club. I know they brought back the online Java meetup group. So that has started going again. So I'm not sure if the book club portion of that is still going, but they used to do that. It's like, hey, we're going to read 2 chapters this week. Let's come back and talk about that in a couple weeks. So,
our good friend Jitter Ted also has a regular book club.
Nice. So, I did not know that. That's awesome.
Hopefully that was a good answer. Hopefully that that helped.
All right. Again, get your questions in. We'll see if we can't talk about them, but we'll kind of jump into what we wanted to cover today. And we'll do that by starting with one of our favorite places on the internet, calendar.spring.io. If this is new to you, this is a really good place to kind of catch up on all the releases in the Spring ecosystem. We're not just talking about Spring Framework and Spring Boot. There are a bunch of projects in the ecosystem. And if you're always wondering, like, oh, when does a new version of this come out and what's being included in it, this is a really great place to take a look. So here we are on the 9th. For those of you, again, listening on the podcast, head over to calendar.spring.io. You can view this in like a calendar view. You can view it in a list view. But I could see later this week, Spring Framework 6.2.0 release candidate 1 is going to be released. And if I'm curious of what is included in that, I can go ahead and click on it. It will take me over to GitHub and show the things that are open still. You can also click on what's closed and kind of see what's being included in this release. So really great place to kind of find out what's going on. Getting closer to some big things. So if you look down at next week, we have a few Spring Boot versions on the 19th. Spring Boot 3.3.4 and then 3.4.0 milestone 3. So ramping up quickly on 3.4, which is coming out usually November, right?
Yes.
Right around Thanksgiving.
Yep.
It's weird to say that. I realize summer's over and we're like into fall now. It's just
right
weird to
around the
say that
corner.
November is right around the corner.
But I don't want to like skip over. Spring Monolith has been a real popular project lately, and we've been hearing about the 1.3 release for a while. But now we have a third milestone, and yeah, it's cruising. That project
Nice.
is moving fast and continues to grow. And Spring Batch, I'm also still a huge fan of Spring Batch. Spring Batch has a first milestone coming out next week, and then one coming up, it looks like a month later. So, or
Awesome.
3 weeks later. So yeah, it's exciting times here. Things are
Cool.
moving fast.
All right. Something else I wanted to talk about this week. There was a really great article by JetBrains on the top 12
I know which one you're
podcasts
talking
for
about.
Java developers in 2024. Spoiler alert, we were on here. That's why we're kind of talking about it today. But even if we're not on here, I think there's a really good list of them. So I figured we just kind of mention a few of them as we go through here. So Duke's Corners podcast. This is from Oracle, really good podcast, committed, around Java. And I like that each of these in the article, they list like, hey, you can go listen to it. Here are the topics. Here's the format. So if you're like a short podcast person or a long podcast person, it kind of tells you how long it is. And then it has some really cool things here. An episode to start with. Like if you've never listened to this episode or this podcast, start with this episode and hear some interesting facts about it.
Very cool.
So we have that one. We have a beautiful podcast with our own Josh Long, obviously a must listen to. Episodes. I think I wanted to like point something out. So what began as a simple way for Josh to share his passion for Java, Spring, and cloud computing with developers has now evolved into a hub for deep technical discussion, engaging personal stories, and industry trends. So yeah, that's cool. I mean, just kind of similar to this, right? Started with just us wanting to kind of share our passion and turned into this.
Yeah. And you and I both listened to Josh interview Rod Johnson last night. And that wasn't even a beautiful podcast episode.
Yeah.
Like he has literally, like he has really become a really good interviewer. And Josh's like depth and context. He has all of the history around so many projects that are open source that are being used by us all the time. So his interviews are always very, very interesting, and yeah, they just keep on getting better. So very proud of what he's done, and grateful for all the stuff he's doing.
Absolutely. Another one on here is Fujay, Friends of the OpenJDK, hosted by Frank. And I believe, were you on this podcast or were you just on
Yes.
a live stream with Frank? Okay,
I was on that
You were.
podcast not too long ago.
Yeah. What did you guys chat
We
about?
talked about embedded Java. You know, I'm a big fan of Spring Boot on the Edge and Raspberry Pis and where all these really interesting places that we're running Java. And there was a time where I was doing what was it, J2ME, like the micro.
Yep.
Back we had some phones back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where we could run these Java workloads. And I thought it was just slick. So yeah, I've always been interested in all of the places that we can take our Java code. And yeah, now it's Spring Boot, right? Because we can do so many cool things with Spring Boot apps. So yeah, good times.
Yeah,
And
so
that
if
is
you
also a
want
good podcast.
two episodes to start with, you can start with this artificial intelligence one and the one with Deshaun Carter. So
Yes.
the Stack Overflow podcast. I'll be honest, this is one I've not listened to yet, but now I'm going to, since it's on this list. I'm going to go through all these actually. Discuss a wide range of topics from the latest languages to industry buzz. 30 to 45 minutes. Again, I've never started with this, so I like that it has an episode to go ahead and start with. Java Off the Heap podcast, a group of passionate Java developers, including Freddie Gleam. I don't know if I'm not
You can read
pronouncing
that.
right. Bob
One of those.
Paulin, Michael Manila.
We know that name.
I know that name. And Josh, I'm not going to pronounce that because I don't want to do it injustice. But this is another one I have not listened to, and I didn't realize Michael Manila was on this. Have you had a chance to go through this?
So no, I've added a bunch of these to my subscriptions.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm in the middle of migrating to a new podcast home.
Ooh,
solution.
tell us more. What are you doing?
The Google Podcast is no longer a thing, and they made some changes, so I gotta move things, and I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. I'm still kind of figuring it out.
There's a running joke that if you're ever using a Google product, it may get like shelved at some point.
That's just
Starting.
how it happens.
Well, if I can make a suggestion, I use the Pocket Casts. I'm a big fan of that one. I don't know what it is. It just kind of organizes everything good for me. I can click through and see show notes and all the things that I would want from a podcast player. I seem to like it a lot. So,
Okay.
the next one is the Happy Path Programming Podcast with Bruce Eckel and James Ward.
Yeah.
I've definitely listened to this one before. I like their in-depth knowledge of everything they kind of go through. It's not really just kind of like here's like a surface of it. They go pretty in depth in a lot of things. So the episode to start with here, Gathering Nerds and Java Gatherers with Venkat Subramanian. That is, anytime you can listen to Venkat, that seems like a good episode to start with. What is this one, Deshaun?
This one, it looks familiar. It looks familiar.
Does.
That's us.
That's us. So yeah, again, the reason we wanted to share this was because this was on it. But yeah, just really thankful for JetBrains for putting this together and including this on this list. That made my Friday. I sent it over to you. Internally, some people were talking about it.
Pleasant
We were
surprise.
really excited to see that. So.
Yes.
Airhacks FM with host Adam Bean. Adam does a great job. He's been in the Java space forever. Really great podcast. And he does something similar. He answers a lot of questions on Airhacks. So you can like send him in via like GitHub pull requests or something. And then he'll go through and answer those. So yeah. Another good one here is the Java Pub House with Freddie and Bob. And I've actually been on this podcast talking about Spring Boot 3. So I would suggest taking a listen to that one as well. Okay, rounding it out, Coding Blocks. This is various software developments, not only Java related, but there is an episode to start with here talking about Apache Kafka. So really good one there. Code Newbie. This one is with Saran. This isn't Java specific. I know this is more kind of general software, but it is kind of aimed towards newbies. So if you're like a new developer, they kind of talk through some different topics, starting with this episode to start with, the journey from sound engineer to software engineer, how someone kind of made the transition. Saran she has like her hands in a whole bunch of projects, but I've heard her on a few different podcasts. I forget the other one she did with IBM, kind of the backstories of certain companies and such. She just does an awesome job, like storytelling and interviewing. So I can't recommend this and her enough.
Fantastic. That's good. Adding it to my list.
Developer T with Jonathan Cottrell. I've heard of this one. I have not gone through this one before. This is 10 to 20 minutes. So that's nice. I do like some of these shorter podcasts because I can get through those. Some of the really big podcasters out there, I cannot list. They're like 3-4 hours long. Like, I do not have time to go through that, even at 1.5x.
And then yesterday was 2 hours with Rod Johnson, and
yeah,
it felt like it was 30. It didn't feel like it was 2 hours. So yeah, like I say that, but like I also like to have the hey, I'm going to listen for this long. I need to mow the lawn or whatever it is, and having those consumable chunks as well. So yeah, it depends, right? I have a bunch to choose from.
Well, again, really great list. Thanks to JetBrains for putting this out, and thanks for including us in that
Arena,
list.
thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. We got a couple. Is there a question there?
There is a question. Like, how do you deal with the pressure in a Scrum sprint as a Java developer? I mean, the pressure created by constant talk about deadlines and questions about how much longer something will take. Right? The manager is pushing hard to get everything done on time during the sprint, which is very challenging. And sometimes I end up doing unpaid overtime. I understand. I can empathize, and I don't envy that position. And,
nope.
It's I understand that not everybody has the ability to find a new role. Culture matters, and that pressure, your mental health is an important part of it. So yeah, like I try to discourage as much as possible the working for unpaid overtime, and because if you're going to continue to do the unpaid overtime, you're setting up the expectation that you're going to be doing the unpaid overtime, and that their expectations of you are okay. So there has to be a line somewhere, but I get it. Right? That's not always possible.
Yeah, and unfortunately I've been in a couple of these environments where every 2 weeks is the most important 2 weeks of the year, and you have to push back on that culture. I'm not saying to go quit your job, but you have a manager, and this is where you have to have constant dialogue with your manager. If you find that you're in that position, that every 2 weeks you're stressed out, this is too much, hey, we are taking on too much, I'm not able to deliver, so I'm working overtime to like put these features in there, then maybe it's a conversation with your manager saying, hey, something needs to give here. Maybe it's that you're committing to too much. So maybe we need to like track that and say, okay, this sprint I've committed to this, and we ended up actually doing more. And the next sprint that followed suit, right? So now we can go, all right, I see a trend here. We're committing to too much that I'm not able to deliver. And it's not a skill issue. It's we're taking on too much work. So maybe we need to scale that back a little bit and have a little bit more realistic expectations. Because as Deshaun said, if you just keep allowing yourself to be in that position of taking on all of this work and delivering it, then that is going to be the expectation of you every single time. So it's not easy to do, but that's what good managers are for. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Let them know how you're feeling, that you're a little stressed out. And I've been on the other end of that going, okay, I understand this. Like sometimes managers don't see that, right? Maybe you're very stressed out. You're working too much. Maybe your manager has way too many directs and just doesn't see it and doesn't have that level of visibility. So the biggest thing I can say there is make sure you are communicating that and talking that with not only your manager, but with your team. Maybe you're the only one on your team doing that, or maybe your entire team is like that. And so that's where I think you really got to talk about it.
Yeah. The other thing I can say from experience is keep track of the things that you're working on.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes that I made for 15 years of my career was assuming that my managers knew how much work I was doing. And that's not possible. And it sounds like in this situation, your manager doesn't understand how much work you're actually doing and how long things are taking. So this is my little bit of advice: is keep track of the things that you're working on, all the things you're working on,
Yeah.
so at least you have, when you go to your manager, say, hey, this has been too much. Make sure that you've got it, written down, that you can describe. Here's what I've had to do, and here's how long things take.
That's a really good point, because another thing that we don't think about is you're asked to be working on X number of features in a sprint, right? But sometimes what gets caught in the weeds are all the other things that you're being asked to do as well. So, hey, I'm in too many meetings every week. I need to be able to push back on this if you still want me to be able to work on X number of features per sprint, right? Maybe you're being asked to like work on other things. Maybe you're in meetings helping other teams with the work that they're doing that have to integrate with your products, right? If those things aren't visible to your manager, to you, then he or she is not going to be able to help you at that. So as Deshaun said, maybe a working log during a sprint saying, here, 50% of the time I was working on these features, but the other 50% of the time has been taken up by these other things that are happening. So once you can get that log just do it for a sprint or two, you can go back to your manager and say, we need to cut some of this if we want to keep this kind of workload on me. And again, that's where the communication is going to help. And I'm sure your manager will be able to work with you and help kind of clear some of those roadblocks. Because for me, the best managers that I've had in my career have been ones that you can talk to and then are really good at clearing roadblocks, because that will help you out immensely. So again, just have that talk with them.
Yep. Simon's dropping knowledge here. Is like about like, hey, there's a point. I think, Dan, you're in the same spot where there's a point in my career where I just thought I was an amazing developer, but I just actually had more time. I didn't have wife and kids, so I was able to put in the extra hour, and I wasn't taken away from anything else. So there we go. I just had more time, and I was delivering. But looking back, like, hey, thankfully I had more time to dig into things. But Simon points out, the only people that will remember that you worked late are your kids. So,
I saw that one day. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Duct Tape DevOps says, hi. Simon adds, indeed, in the number of you can take a quick look, tasks stack up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great question, though. And you are not the only one facing that challenge. This is something we all deal with at different levels of severity, I will say. Okay, cool. Let me go back to this. And so, let's talk about Spring One. First off, if you go over to spring1.io, the video that is on the homepage saying thank you for joining us is the Spring Spotlight. This was our keynote that happened on Monday. Deshaun and I were both involved in this, which was really cool. We put a lot of work into it with a whole team, months in advance going up to this. And we had some, I think I got in on Saturday evening. You got in Sunday morning. Sunday morning we had, Sunday afternoon we had a rehearsal. Things went good. This is why we rehearsed, though. We found some things to improve on. And I thought the show on Monday went really well. How about you?
I was happy. Our session, the video started a little bit early, so we kept on playing catch up on the video. I remember on Sunday during rehearsal, I told my mom after, I was like, "Mom, the rehearsal went great. Now I'm nervous. Like, I don't know if the week, because it went so well on Sunday, and then yes, on Monday, the video started a little early, so we were playing catch up, but it worked. We had fun with it. We hit the points that we wanted to, but yeah, we were playing catch up the whole time, so it went really, really fast.
Yeah,
but it was fun. It was a great show overall. Everything worked. The demos were great. The content was great. So it was good.
It was a lot of fun, and I got to MC. That was pretty cool. That's the first time I've been an MC. I know you've done that before, but yeah, that was just a lot of fun being introduced as the host of the show and be able to walk up there and introduce, Purnima, you guys, Sebastian, the guys from Netflix. It was just so much fun. So
yeah, good times.
From the Spring Spotlight, what kind of stood out to you? Because I know I had a couple things that stood out for me.
So there's a lot of the stuff, because we're doing this, when we're not on shows and we're not at conferences, these are the conversations that we're having with customers all the time. These are the topics and the technologies that we're using, and we're looking at the roadmaps and we're seeing how customers are using them. But the thing that honestly stood out for me the most was the interview between Jurgen and James Waters. I really appreciated how well Jurgen was able to explain clearly what they're doing. I felt like I got a really good peek into what things look like. And I've known about Jurgen and what Dadev is doing, but yeah, that was my favorite part. That was like the most like it hit the best for me. It sat the best for me because it was kind of the new perspective, and I didn't get to see it in the rehearsal. So that was the part that was kind of like the biggest gift for me was
Nice.
that interview. How about you?
Yeah, I liked. I liked everything, but a couple things for me. First, the demo with Josh, Cora, and Mark Pollock. They went up there and they built a whole app that included Spring Modulith. Cora went through a Spring Modulith demo. Josh went through and Mark went through and talked about Spring AI at a high level, and then they incorporated some of that AI into this application, and they built and deployed a whole application right on stage, which was really cool. And then I got to introduce the Netflix guys from
Paul and Asi
from Netflix, and they went through kind of how Netflix uses Spring. So they have just a mass amount of applications. They have like 3,000 Java applications running.
That's the slide that is of the whole event. There's that one slide where they had the cast from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
And then it says, how do we upgrade 3,000 Java apps? Now what?
Yeah.
Whatever it said. I just remember that one slide just being like, oh, that's awesome.
And I thought they were just running 3,000 Java apps, and like some of them were Spring. And after talking to Paul and Asi, like, no, most of those 3,000 are Spring apps, and so they've upgraded from 2.7 or 2.x to 3.0, and in a lot of cases they're on 3.2 because they're taking advantage of virtual threads. And yeah, it was just cool to see like, okay, well, if you think you're going through a lot trying to upgrade one or two apps, what have they tried to do at scale to upgrade 3,000 apps? So that was cool to see.
And every just like we said, every 2 weeks is the most important weeks, most important time of the customer. Sometimes I get into a situation and teams like, well, we have 15 apps that we need to upgrade, and I'm like, okay, like let's get started. When I think both of us have worked with teams where we've helped them upgrade hundreds of apps in weeks. And there's not every app has the same kind of path, the same level of importance, whether it's revenue or cost savings or time savings. At different scales, different organizations, it doesn't have to be the 3,000 apps. Sometimes there's the one app that's connected to a fetal heart rate monitor, right? Different apps have different vectors of importance in different directions. So the stuff that we get to see, and thanks again, Netflix, Paul and Asi for coming up and sharing, because they also, they didn't just share, oh, everything's not right. They're not done upgrading. It's still a process. Their insights helps, I think, level set that not everybody's able to upgrade to the latest and greatest immediately, right? There's a lot of things that are in place, but once you do, that was the one thing that they said is once you do get upgraded, what they are doing now is those apps that have been upgraded, now they are being continuously upgraded going forward.
Yep.
So that's exciting.
And it was really great to meet Paul and Asi. I haven't met them before in person. And they were just great to hang out with. They were in the front row of the Spring Theater for every talk, listening, interacting. So it was a lot of fun to meet them. And I saw this. If you follow Paul on Twitter, if you're in Los Gatos, California, they are hiring for someone on their team for Java and Spring development. So check out Paul's Twitter if you can. If you're in that area, that'd be a great opportunity to work with an awesome team. So, the other one thing for me in the kind of spring spotlight was Sebastian. Sebastian Deleuze came up and talked about runtime efficiency, and I thought he had a lot of really great info packed into like I think it was 8 minutes. Walked through some demos on how he took like a Spring the Pet Clinic app. Use something like CDS just to improve runtime efficiency with very little changes, right? With a couple flags. So that was really cool to see. So yeah, that was the spring spotlight. Oh, we got a comment.
Yep, Simon talking about Open Rewrite and its derivative products like Q do make upgrading and staying on the latest a lot easier.
You also got up on the stage with our friend Chris Sterling, and you talked about upgrading as well. After the were you
right after the Netflix guys?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Right, the story, I've been talking about Open Rewrite a lot. We talk about it here, but like since 2.7, right? Like since we were all running 2.7, I was using Open Rewrite to keep upgraded. It was a valuable product, and now as we talk about it, and as we deal with our enterprise customers and even like startups, there's a ton of value in being on the latest and greatest. And we introduced Open Rewrite to a lot of customers. We had tools like Spring Boot Migrator that had similar concepts built in, and our customers were using them. And we were taking that feedback. Spring is an open source framework. It's an open source product, and there's a massive community behind it. And because we're supporting enterprise customers, we're hearing and helping them with this automation, we heard and we listened. So now we have a commercial product called Spring Application Advisor that's, again, built on top of Open Rewrite. And that's what we went over, and how it can integrate and how it can help move you forward faster. The interesting part here is that a lot of people think about Open Rewrite first as a way to get us patched and get us onto the latest and greatest. But now there's a big part of the community that's already done that, and they're on the latest and greatest. And what they're trying to do is stay on the latest, stay patched continuously. And that's where Spring Application Advisor comes in. So
yeah, and I think that we've talked about this a couple times. One of the important points of upgrading, I think we talked about it with Netflix as well. Is it's like, okay, well, you're going through a lot of overhead here to make this upgrade from 2.x to 3.x, right? But you can't think of it as like a one-time thing. You want to get some kind of system and process to be able to continuously do this. So this isn't let's just make all this effort happen to get onto 3.x. It's let's make this effort so that we can continuously make these upgrades, be on the latest and greatest, take advantage of performance improvements that come in Java almost every single time, security improvements, take advantage of things like virtual threads that are now available in Spring Boot 3.2 and beyond. So this is not a one-time thing. This is let's try and find a way to automate this every single time. So we're never in this boat again. We're still on Java 8 and we're still on Spring Boot 2.4 or whatever, right? So yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
There's a thread here. If you were a person that was writing libraries in Java for a long time, you had this massive window and you had this massive return on investment where that library that you wrote against Java 8, for example, had this huge window to be used and to have growth. But today, if you're a person that writes libraries, you're having to figure out how to deliver. You can no longer just be delivering with Java 8, like the rest of the ecosystem is moving too fast. So you, library writer, have to be supported, 11, 17, 21, 22. 23 is coming out this month, right? Java 23 is, right? It's September, and I believe Java 23.
Next week, right?
Next week?
Yeah. Or this week or next week?
It was September 18th last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe it's next week.
September. I'm looking. But if you're a library writer, you've got to constantly be updating. So there's this whole new motion for the Java ecosystem in that, again, we get a new Java version every 6 months. So your libraries need to be going through this same process, just like your end users need to be going through this process. And Open Rewrite is an amazing framework to help make that happen.
It looks like the 17th. So yeah,
Okay.
next week.
There you go. Right around the corner, and we should celebrate. It's worth celebrating. Thank you, Andu. September 17th.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've been talking to customers, to developers about is you really have to think about the dependencies you're including in your projects, right? I see this happen a lot more in the JavaScript world, but this pertains to every kind of language and framework. The next time you need to do something, don't just reach for some library. Don't just go install 20 different dependencies to do 20 different things, because the next time you want to upgrade, now you have to consider all of those third-party dependencies that you've brought in, right? Maybe there's an easier way to do it that's built into the language or built into the framework that you're using without having to pull in that third-party library. So always something to think about. I know a lot of companies that we work with have standards on, like, here are the libraries that we support.
Yep.
And they're not there to hinder you or make your job harder. They're there because they have felt the pain before of trying to upgrade a product that includes 100 different dependencies when you didn't need all of those. So just something to think about next time you're clicking a button to install a dependency.
And I'm not trying to say that I'm old. I'm not trying to say that you're old, but we've been around long enough where there was a point in our career where if it was open source, if it was, something that had a Apache license or whatever, if we didn't have to pay for it, a lot of times our company said, yeah, go ahead. But today, though, even the licenses, even though it may be open source or free to use or have one of the BGPL license, like depending on your organization, you might come under higher scrutiny. Some of those licenses might not be allowed to be a part of your applications. So There's a lot more at stake today than there was 25 years ago when we started doing this. The license rules and the freedoms have changed quite a bit, and you have to stay on top of it, right? When you upgrade from a 1.x to 2.x, the license might have changed, and your ability to use it might have changed. So we have a lot more things to think about these days. But luckily, we also have a lot better tools, and we have a lot more things that are moving to production faster. Things are moving faster, so we do have more time to think about these things. And the more automation, the better.
Cool. All right. So after the keynote at Spring One, we went. Was it down? Yeah, we went down to the main floor into the hub where the Spring Theater was. It was its own dedicated place where all of the Spring talks were going to take place. And if you go on the Spring Developer YouTube channel and go over to playlists, there is one for Spring One 2024. And that will kind of take you to this and kind of have all of those talks here. Now, some of you might have joined us online live from Spring One. We had a number of those talks that we were live streaming. I know Deshaun and I did some like emceeing for that, kind of introducing those talks. But the good news is, I would say all the talks on day 1, 2, and 3, even if they weren't live streamed, were recorded. So I know you and I both had a talk that wasn't on the live stream there, but then is now included in this list. So if you did watch the live stream and you caught all of the talks, kudos to you. Come back to this playlist because there's some more talks that you can catch out. So for you, 3 days of Spring talks. Well, first, let's start with your talks. Well, you had talks in both the Spring Theater and throughout VMware Explore, right?
Yeah. I like to get to production and just my experience and my comfort level. I do a lot of the infrastructure stuff, right? We've talked about it. I have hundreds of machines deployed here, most of them Raspberry Pis. but I like that whole infrastructure side of things. I'm comfortable there too. So I did. I spoke in the Tanzu Code Theater. I
Nice.
spoke about Spring AI and the Tanzu Gen AI tile for Cloud Foundry. And what that does is allows us to deliver and share and deploy these different LLMs, SLMs privately, safely, quickly, so that we can adopt and we can find the right solution, and we can avoid some of those troubles with licensing issues and with security issues of training somebody else's LLM with our questions, right? So these are valuable things that I enjoy, and again, where I'm spending some of my time when I'm not on stream and delivering content, it's spending time on how do we make things easier. I get excited about developers being productive, about developers getting to production with new things. That brings me joy. So I enjoyed spending time over there. So my talks in the Tanzu side of the house were specifically on Spring AI and the new Gen AI tile, which allows us to deliver these LLMs and SLMs safely and quickly.
Awesome.
And it was fun.
Awesome. Then you had one here in the Spring Theater, Spring Data Hidden Gems. I could see myself introducing you there.
And that was fun.
Yeah, how'd that talk go?
I enjoyed that talk because I wasn't really sure where I was going to take it. I had tons of content prepared, but I was kind of trying to fill the shoes of Chris Strobel, and that's hard. There's a lot of pressure
Very
there.
hard.
So
Yes.
I went through the audience and I asked the audience, like, hey, what's the one thing that you want to learn here? And I got some really, really good answers. And then I went over and I changed my slides, and that's what I tried to drill into. I tried to give the audience what they came to find, and also the questions after. I had a lot of really good conversations after that. So the data conversation is always there. There's always fun things, and Spring Data is amazing. And okay, we just got done talking about Spring AI. I kind of put those two into the same bucket these days because a lot of the work that's being done is being done with both of them, with both of those projects.
Cool. Yeah, I had a couple talks there as well. I did one on GraphQL.
And how was that?
That one went really good. It's not the same talk. It had some of the same components, but I definitely changed that up to cover some of the new features. And it was one that was being live streamed, so I was a little bit nervous from that one.
And you might have had some pressure with audience.
I just had Paul Baker sitting right up front, looking at me the whole time. But Paul came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh wow, this was a really great introduction to GraphQL." He was like, "I was worried we were gonna clash on what we were covering." He's like, "That was a really good segue into what I'm gonna be talking about."
That's awesome.
I got some great feedback from him.
Just a little bit of context for the audience. We on the team, we go and we give these presentations, and we're constantly upgrading them. We're constantly because we're having conversations with customers all over the globe, and that talk, giving your API a rest with Spring for GraphQL, that is one of the most popular talks that we give. Whenever we are talking about doing this with customers, that one constantly moves up to the top of the list. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, I highly recommend you take a look at that presentation.
Yeah, check this one out. And then if you get a chance and you want to learn a little bit more about some of the new features in Spring for GraphQL, Rawson did a talk at Spring IO in Barcelona. I would highly recommend going through that talk as well. Rawson and Brian Kozel on the Spring side, just awesome. So they have some really great talks on there as well. I also did a talk on navigating the front-end landscape. So, hey, you're a Spring developer, you have this back end and you need to build a front end for it. How do you do it? That one was not live streamed, but as I said before, that is now recorded and up there, so you can go ahead and check that out.
So what did you talk about there? What did you cover?
A little bit of everything. It was more like a high level overview. I'm a back end developer. I need a front end. I don't know what my options are. There's a ton of options out there, right? Let's try and narrow that down a little bit. So we talked about Java. If you want to talk about on the Java side, how do you do that? We can do things like use Spring MVC. That's been there forever. That still works. You can use something like Timeleaf and get something stood up pretty quickly. Also in Java, we talked about Vaadin, a great product that we love, that we've talked about on the show. And then I went into the JavaScript side of things and talked about, there's so much change there. Here are a few things that you can kind of focus on. So I gave, a little bit of a resource on that. And then we talked about HTMX. So really just like a bunch of different ways that you can kind of build out a front end. And yeah, I thought that talk went really well. So
fantastic.
The other thing I want to point out is there are, how many videos in this list? Where do I see that? I don't know. There's probably like 40 or something, maybe more. And there are just, every single one of these talks is worthy of your attention and time. And I'm not just saying that. I was sitting there in the Spring Theater for most of those. I was able to watch some of the ones that I wasn't able to catch, and just a really, really good dive into some of these things. So there is a talk with Sebastian. Somebody said, I want to go a little bit deeper with CDS. I know his talk is 45 minutes. There's a good amount of info on there on that if you're interested.
And he also released a blog after the talk because there was more questions. So the blog post got released after his talk. So Simon, I'll try to find that real quick. But yeah, the blog post does go deeper.
And then Paul Baker did kind of a follow-up for me and kind of dove more into like how Netflix uses GraphQL. So the next time that someone tells you like GraphQL is a fad and nobody's using it, Netflix is using it at scale. So they use Federation there, where they kind of have GraphQL APIs in each of their services, and then they kind of have one GraphQL API layer. And he talked a lot about how Netflix uses GraphQL there. Some other talks for me, Josh got on stage with Mark and Dr. Mark Polk and Rod Johnson, the creator of Spring. So that was a really cool, interesting talk on AI. If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and check that out. I'm trying to think. Every one of these that I've went through so far, I've really enjoyed. Any other ones stood out for you? There's a Spring Modula talk that we talked with. We talked with him before.
Oh yeah,
Tim's, yeah.
Yes, I didn't get to sit through his whole thing. I had other things happening, but yes, what I saw was good, and I liked that talk. I got to see it beforehand several times, and Tim did a good job of like. It was more about like lessons learned while you're trying to change architectures, while you're trying to improve architectures, and how. A little bit was like how Spring Modula helped, but more of it was like the process and how it changed the culture and the process around delivering software. So it was, I need to go back and watch that. I did take some pictures, but yeah, I need to go back and watch that one.
Jonathan had a great talk on observability, as always. I love watching his talks. So check that out.
Another one I really about how good Jonathan's talk was.
Yeah, it was
which
so good.
I'm not surprised anymore.
Another one I really enjoyed in person was Rob Winch's security talk. He started his talk with, how many people are here for the slides? And some people raised their hand. How many people are here for the code? This was the only slide he showed, and then the rest of it was all him coding. So that was really great.
And again, I got to hang out with Rob a little bit. One of the things that, again, just my perspective and part of what makes me smile, we're from the same area, so I'm a big fan of his for a long time, but I've also watched him present over the years, and I've been a fan of his presentations. I like his style, but over the years, I've also watched him get even better. So I really enjoy watching him because I know that he can go down path A, and somebody asks a question and he'll backtrack his code. So this is something that I've seen others do it, but I've never seen somebody do it quite like he does. He can backtrack his code, go backwards on path A, and here's where we made the decision. Now let's do that same thing on path B. And he can do it seamlessly. Like, I'm so amazed at how much he has in his head and how he knows the questions to ask, and he can always like fill in the blanks when somebody says like, oh, I was doing this one thing and it was kind of like this and it felt like this. He goes, oh, I know that class name and which method line signature that is. Like, I know exactly what we're talking about, and here's what you need. He has so much stuff in his head, and I just always smile watching him present. He's amazing.
Yep. Cool.
Rob Winch.
Yeah. That
Spring
playlist
Security
is
League.
there.
Check it out.
Go ahead and check out all of these videos. Thanks to all the speakers. You guys were great. This was a lot of fun to be a part of, and exhausting. Oof. I took a red eye home, got home, and I was just wiped out. It was a long few days, but well worth it.
Yes. This Simon says, I always love it when people further optimize and smoothen the path to the best place to be. Trademark. Yes, like getting to production is such a big deal. Hearing Josh and Rod last night talk about Spring evolution, all the other stories, the rest of the ecosystem, how we got here, and to realize like sometimes this community doesn't realize how easy things are. They don't realize how easy they got it. And yeah, things are cruising. Another good little note here is, hi guys, are there any production use cases of Spring AI? Yeah, like Spring AI is being used all over the place, whether it's the chat bots that we know are running in production, but a couple of interesting use cases that I'm seeing without throwing customers' names on them is like the image. What we had in milestone 1, I believe, was the multi-modal. We can do voice, audio, and image. And now we have these image use cases that are going to production. And then a couple of others are like some of the audit stuff. Like, do I have personal identifiable information in this data, and letting the LLMs filter, decipher, etc. So yeah, there are tons of use cases. Spring AI is that abstraction over the LLMs. The most important part is securing the LLMs and the data that's going to and from those, making sure that you're not going over budget. Because I've also heard about this, where teams are now, because of all these use cases that are getting to production, now we got to make sure that we're not spending too much money on those, and make sure we're getting the right value coming back. So yeah.
Yep.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Summarization in a lot of places. So let's say you're a call center and you take in, each call center employee takes in 50 calls in a day. Let me get a summarization of what calls they were on today, like what subjects were broached or discussed, what was the outcome, that kind of thing. Being able to summarize those things quickly, being able to, we had a bunch of Zoom calls this week with customers. Take the transcript out, summarize that for me. Give me 3 key points of that. Document summarization is a big one. Being able to generate content from existing content. So I take our internal docs, our internal API information, our internal documentation, and generate something new. Like here's a new blog post about a new feature that we're putting together. So in any place that you are finding where there is a lot of human interaction, where we need to like do the same thing over and over again, like Deshaun said, going through something and making sure our audit trail is clean, like that is something that you can still use a human for, but you can really ramp up your production and be more productive with something like AI. And yeah, there are use cases anywhere. If you want to, don't focus on, are there production use cases for Spring AI? Focus on, are there production use cases for AI in general? Like, what is AI being used for in the workplace? And if that's the case, Spring AI makes it easy to do. So,
yep.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, I think that's it. I think that's our show, just Deshaun.
I mean, this is great. I'm glad to be back. I think that we should have 2 shows next week. I think we should do our Monday regular show. I think we should also do a show on Tuesday, because we're getting a new version of Java. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to some of our friends over at Oracle and see if maybe we can align with whatever's happening. I'm sure they're doing a release party. I'm excited. And I think that Oracle Cloud World is also happening next week. So yeah, I'm sure there's something fancy going on. So yeah, let's reach out. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm sure our friend Billy would be busy on Tuesday, but maybe we can get him another day.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Let's find out. Let's have fun.
Cool. Well, with that, we appreciate everyone showing up in the live stream. Again, you can go ahead and catch the replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And as just a friendly reminder, if you enjoy this podcast and want to help us out a little, go ahead and leave us a comment wherever you're listening to your podcasts on. It just helps us get in front of more people. Again, thanks to JetBrains for including us on that list of 12 podcasts you should listen to. We will leave all the things we talked about in the show notes. And with that, we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.